it's mind-blowing to think that this is our reality in this day and age. We're alive in this day and age. This is an accumulation of hundreds of thousands of years of human innovation, human engineering, human design, human discovery has accumulated to the last 5 years of history. And we're here for it.
It's great to have Michai back on. It's been a little bit of time since I've had him on, and he's kind of my resident AI and technology expert because he's just got his finger on the pulse of everything going on in that sector. And there's been some crazy developments literally in the last couple of days with this. So I just want to jump straight into the robot situation and get your on it.
Hey, Figure 1, what do you see right now?
I see a red apple on a plate in the center of the table, a drying rack with cups and a plate, and you standing nearby with your hand on the table.
Great, can I have something to eat?
Sure thing.
Great. Can you explain why you did what you just did while you pick up this trash?
On it. So I gave you the apple because it's the only edible item I could provide you with from the table.
Basically, a lot of people would kind of look at that and see it as a basic development in robotics and, using maybe a scripted process to show an example of how it's capable. And so what is the difference between that and what's happening here with the AI integration?
So first, let's backtrack a little bit. I'm going to plug myself. A few years ago, I did an interview. I can't remember with who, but I had stated at the cusp of GPT-3 first coming out, I knew that it was going to be an eventuality that at some point, all of these advanced robotic platforms that have been shelved for so long, simply because there hasn't been a proper, we'll call it a brain, to control them. The hardware platforms have been there for some time. We've had great robotic platforms. They just haven't been able to do anything. And so companies who build the robots, who have been doing that for many years, struggled to, get them into consumer or commercial hands because what good's a robot without a brain? Now we have a brain. So what they've done, this company, Figma, brand new, I had never heard of them, and I watched the landscape quite, like a hawk, and I hadn't heard of them aside from cursory mentions with OpenAI. But what they've done is they've taken this robotic platform and they've paired it with this multimodal AI. Basically, it has, vision learning, text-to-speech technologies. It has LLM technologies. So it has all of this crammed into the robotic platform and what it's doing. And I'm pretty sure, I don't know, but I'm willing to bet they sped it up for the video because processing is still quite slow. And I don't think they were using Grok.
What made me wonder about that was that the guy had his hand on the table the entire time and he was staying extremely still. And I was like, I wonder if they're doing that to show that he's not moving around a little bit because they've spent.
They probably took some liberties there. I'm not sure if they sped it up, but I would be willing to bet they did. But what that provides us is it's a use case scenario. It's a proof of concept. These things can be paired. And as an early iteration of this pairing, it's pretty phenomenal. What your viewers will see is a guy talking to this robotic platform. Looks a lot like Elon's.
Yeah, it does actually. What's the name of his one?
Optimus, I believe, is his platform.
Yeah.
Looks a lot like it, but I think what we'll see is we're going to come to terms with a framework that's acceptable, that we all recognize, and that's probably what, most robotic platforms will look like going forward. Similar with cars, they deviate slightly aesthetically, but in general, they look pretty similar. So you see a robotic platform, a guy's interacting, posing natural language questions to it. It's registering his voice, converting that speech into text in its brain, using the localized LLM to understand, and then overlaying its visual processing, because it has cameras on its head. And he's asking questions like, well, what do you see here on the table? And it presents what it sees, an apple and some dishes. And then it uses its understanding that it's a table and it's probably used for, meal production or something. And it based on that understanding, it then can perform actions based on the user, and then
logic and reason.
Yeah. And then present that to the user in terms of action and voice. And the voice sounds a lot like an 11 Labs voice clone, which for people who don't know what that is, that's probably one of the best text-to-speech APIs that are available. I have a voice clone of myself that I sometimes will use for copy or media. Works really well. I mean,
it didn't quite hit it with me.
Yeah, well, you're too animated. You have a lot of flowery inflections and tone changes. But whereas someone like me, who's pretty monotone for the most part, it does a very good job in mimicking my speech patterns. So, it's pretty amazing. It was an amazing proof of concept of what's going to be coming down the pipeline, because you got to remember, there are a lot of robotic platforms out there that are highly capable, waiting for brains like this to be injected into them, and then they'll be usable. And we're going to see a whole new exponential curve just on robotics very soon.
Exactly. And, you've been pretty on point with giving predictions of where things might go with this technology curve. And how far away are we from an iRobot type of thing? I mean, I feel like in specialty scenarios, it's almost about to happen. But in commonplace, global application commercialization,
I would say 12 to 24 months in terms of special use case scenario, 3 years for it to drop down and be competitive. Because again, this market is already primed. They've built these robotic platforms. They're sitting dusty, waiting to be used.
Waiting for the brain to be put into it, and then it's good to go, right?
Yeah.
That's crazy, man. That's crazy.
And so absolutely within 3 years. Yeah. So this was a big deal. It was validation from myself, and a lot of other people in this space have been saying the same thing. It's finally here. There's proof. There's your proof. And OpenAI is kind of shackled right now. We could branch off on that.
Yeah, that's a whole thread. That's a thread right there.
OpenAI is in some hot water with Elon. Whether or not they'll lose the case, the lawsuit, it doesn't really matter, because what he's accomplished is he's attached a ball and chain to them, in that they have more advanced models. And I can say that with absolute certainty. They have more advanced models sitting in the chamber, ready to go. They're afraid to let that out, because in his argument, in Elon's legal case against them, he's saying that they are getting very close to AGI, and there are clauses within the agreement that stipulate at that point it's a public technology. And OpenAI is counter arguing that when AGI comes out, they will provide public benefit of the technology. However, the technology itself will not be a public technology. So there's some wordplay.
Kind of contradicts the name OpenAI really a little bit, doesn't it?
It does. But they needed to generate revenue to create the technology.
You think they're making the right move?
Yes, but maybe too fast. But here's the linchpin. It doesn't matter anymore. They initiated an entire industry, and so now you have companies like Anthropic, Grok, they're competitors, and now we're seeing them move ahead in terms of ability of OpenAI's model. Despite the fact I know OpenAI has models that probably would score better than Claude 3 or Grok or some of these open source models, but they're afraid to release it because they don't want to be associated with AGI just yet. Even though that's their whole mission statement, they want to do it after this case because they could very easily shoot themselves in the foot. Obviously, they have Microsoft's backing with that whole case, so it's going to be two titans coming to blows here. Very interesting case. Elon, he's a funny guy. He likes to start stuff. If he feels like he was miffed or someone's not upholding to something that was agreed upon, he'll spend his whole waking hours making that right. So Sam is in some hot water. Like I said, I don't know if Elon will win, but for Elon, winning is just screwing OpenAI,
right?
And he's doing that, and that's enough for him. But it does come down to OpenAI also scraped Twitter's data back before that they weren't supposed to be doing that, and so that's a whole nother bag of legalese. But there's a lot going on in the industry in the background that people don't see. Yes, everyone's positioning. So this is, AI has been around, and let me clarify, because people get confused with the term AI. AI denotes a domain of technologies. So that includes machine learning, intelligent algorithms, intelligent automation, GPTs. A whole slew of technologies are associated or underneath the umbrella domain of AI. So when I'm saying AI, I'm just talking about everything. LLMs, everything. So the AI industry is relatively new in its current state. And so what we're seeing is these big players vying for this early foundational control. Once you get control, because AI is one of the most exponential technologies we've ever developed, getting in as a foundational company will set you up for the next century, 2 centuries, who knows? I mean, you'll be a titan of titans. And so they're all vying, they're pulling out every technique, every loophole,
That's what worries me, is that it will entice the behavior of the baddest of actors, right? The ones who are actually willing to do the most in terms of getting what they want and getting the power with this, because it's such a fundamentally disruptive asset coming into the human story. And so they're going to want to leverage that. Everyone will. But the ones that are actually willing to do the most corrupt behavior, unfortunately, will likely get a lot of access to this.
Yeah, well, that's how it's playing out. So what, we talked about this before, what users like us get to use is a very small fraction of these technologies' capabilities. And so and if you don't think that they're leveraging unrestricted models and on the backside, you're naive at best. They are absolutely leveraging these models to accomplish all sorts of very amazing stuff for themselves and their partners, while we're still using, a generation or two behind. That's just how it goes, and so that concerns me in terms of AGI, for obvious reasons. If a multinational company or a conglomerate of partners are leveraging an AGI system, their ability to control the market space and maneuver is it's not fair. It's not a fair practice, and some people would argue, capitalism isn't fair, but it kind of is, because we do play within a marginal rule set that needs to be adhered to. Otherwise, the system doesn't work.
I mean, it would become inherently asymmetric if they're in control of something that has that ability of analysis, data correlation, weaponization of military purposes. Like, there's a lot of avenues where you would have an unfair advantage on the world stage, and obviously some people would be vying for that. Obviously,
yeah. A lot of people are vying for that. A lot of very big players. We're talking the largest companies on Earth and the richest people on Earth. That's the demographic we're talking about. I'm fully convinced that so AGI, it's not just you hit AGI and that's it. That's the maximum that we can achieve in terms of artificial intelligence.
I hate to cut you off, Michai, but we've discussed this a lot privately, but would you be able to just give people a basic idea of what a first iteration of AGI really means?
Yeah, so AGI stands for Artificial General Intelligence, and that differs from the term AI, which I was using earlier to describe a domain of technologies. AGI it encompasses AI and that domain of technologies, but it's advanced in that it has a general understanding of everything. And that when I mean everything, I literally mean physics, society, technology, engineering, math, biology, systems, language, everything. So AGI, the first iterations of AGI will be like our current models, but with a general understanding. But as AGI matures, it will also have different phases. But those phases will be very, very fast. And why is that? Because an AGI will be capable of self, correction, of self-training, of self-development and growth. And we see this. The reason I'm using this secondary computer today is because on my workstation here, I'm actually running a localized auto GPT model to I play with it every once in a while to see how the tech has progressed. And what an auto GPT is, it's like a regular LLM, but it can perform functions and tasks and create a systematic list for itself how to accomplish an objective. It's still kind of early. We're seeing advancements in auto GPTs, but as soon as that becomes mature and that gets paired with multimodal models, an AGI will be able to self-train, self-educate, generate better understandings. And so that exponential curve will be even sharper than the one we're currently observing. It's really quite amazing. So an AGI initially will be very similar to the systems we're using now, but with a much broader level of intelligence and a much broader understanding. As AGI progresses at a rapid pace, it will start to develop an identity or theory of self. It will understand that it is something. To what degree, this is a matter of philosophy and existentialism, and whether or not it's conscious, that doesn't really matter. what we're creating is something that can identify that it's an entity and it's thinking and it has objectives.
I think at that point, I mean, like you said, it doesn't even matter, but at a certain level, if it's actually achieving comparable or above levels of cognition, self-awareness, reflection, the ability to, maybe even empathize, even if it's mimicry, if it's able to do that at a level above or at the same level as humanity, then the idea of saying that it's not conscious is I think, more dogmatic than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where you're just arguing semantics at some point. Is it sapient? Is it sentient? Is it conscious? Yes, no, in the middle on all of them. At the end of the day, we still have developed something wholly unique in the universe as far as we know. And that trend is only going to improve over time. That's just how it is. And you track the improvement over time, and you can forecast what the abilities will be. And that forecast, will vary in terms of how long, but we've seen how poor forecasters are at determining when these systems will come to fruition. 5 years ago, my contemporaries were saying 100 years. It's more like 3 years now, maybe even sooner. So our ability to forecast lengths of time in terms of trends is very poor, mostly because they don't factor in sister technologies that coalesce with technology. So you have multiple curves. Once they join, it increases the steepness of the main arc. We call them compounding vectors, and we've seen a lot of them recently, and they just keep coming faster and faster. So once AGI is implemented and developed, it will be very fast as it improves on itself.
It's kind of interesting that we're almost poised with nuclear war and this artificial genesis, and they almost feel like it literally feels like a forked road. Like there's like one option here where you're going to blow you're going to blow yourselves to hell, or you're going to develop this in time. Do you think that that's a genuine consideration with these guys? Like they're looking at the state of the world and thinking, we got to rush this out. We got to get, an advanced AGI system into the world because this is going to help fix the problems. Like, do you think that they're looking at it from that perspective? Because it does feel like we're balanced on such a tenuous kind of edge right now, with the geopolitical destabilization and, different countries that are nuclear equipped at really close saber rattling with each other, including our own. Don't you find it interesting that there's almost like two potential outcomes happening at the same time?
Yeah, I do. But I don't think that's any different than, maybe at scale, but at any point in human civilization, we've always been in conflict. Right now,
this feels more existential, right? Like more existential.
Yes, because of the scale. The scale of the repercussions are much larger than at any other point in time. But there are many levels of conflict happening right now in the world. We have, the quantum computing arms race. We have the semiconductor arms race. We have AI arms race. We have, political wars, religious wars, economic conflict. It goes on and on and on. And I think even if we didn't develop AI in 100, 1,000 years, we would have destroyed ourselves regardless. And that's based on looking back. And I talked about this before, as someone who forecasts for the future. A lot of what we do is we look in the past. And what does the past show us? The past shows us that every single civilization that has existed does not exist anymore. So to think that we are somehow special and that if we were allowed a long runway, we would break that cycle, the math doesn't say that.
You're right. It's a cyclical pattern that's spelled out through our history. So it's pretty difficult to ignore the fact that there's the rise and fall of civilizations and empires over time. And to be honest, I mean, we can get into this at some point maybe, but it does feel like that anyway at this point, with like a kind of rise of things like BRICS and a more multipolar political dynamic in the world. This feels like we might be in that chapter change of who's actually running things on the global stage, because the West has been in that situation and in that seat for a long time, and it's being challenged pretty significantly now with different alliances. So it's a changing world, like you said, in multiple domains. It's a changing world, and it's the existential level of some of those changes that makes it seem like it's a do or die moment. And I think to some extent you could look at it as a bit of a do or die moment. But with the just kind of like going back to AI, one thing that I still find really weird about it is they don't even fully understand how the neural network's working, right? Like, I've even interrogated the AIs over this, and the explanation is usually, well, there is a little bit of a mystery involved in how I'm able to do X, Y, and Z. And that to me kind of talks of, like, you know, it's like the ghost in the machine a little bit, right?
Well, the neural network design has been around since the 50s or 60s in a very primitive state. So the design has been around, and I think it was in the 80s that they added a recursive function, meaning, you know, it processes and then goes back to the beginning to reflect on the process. And that was a big milestone. And then, you know, obviously in the last 5 to 10 years, the GPT or transformer technology has really, that was the missing link. That was the secret ingredient that we had been missing. And once that was, installed into these previous systems, then all hell broke loose. So going back to what you're saying, we understand systematically how it works in terms of the fine processing. We don't, because it teaches itself how to process faster. So there's probably...
Even there, I've stopped understanding you, because I'm like, but how is it even teaching itself? Like, what's the process inside these ones and zeros and wires and cables that's making an intellect?
It mimics the human brain. So think of when you're a child and you, smack your head on a corner of a chair or something. That hurts, and so your visual sense of seeing the chair, the pain of hitting the chair, and then the desire of not wanting that to happen again, that all becomes an algorithm for future use case to not accomplish again. And what's the reward? You don't experience that again. And so these systems operate very similarly. Obviously, they don't have the sensory input that we have, but it's the same sort of reward modeling system that our brains do. And that's why it's called, neural processing, because it mimics, neural brain.
But that's what's crazy to me is, like, we have to actually use human models to talk about this. And then we're still saying that it's not going to become conscious. It's like, guys, like, we're literally, like, we're having to explain it through the same type of ideas that we have for our own neurology and our own brains and how they're working, and risk and reward and learning. And so like you said, it's a child, it's being grown into this more mature version of itself. And oh man, it's so strange to me that this is happening, because it feels like in the next couple of years, like in maybe a year or 2 years from now, it will be much harder to try and deny just how fundamental this is, and how, because this is the beginning of it, and people like you and people like me that pay attention to emerging technology and are interested in it are seeing it. And the population, of course, is using GPT, but a lot of people are super dismissive of AI. Like, I see it because I'm excited about it and talk about it online. And I get a lot of pushback from people who are saying, oh, it's not like that, or it will never be this, or it will never be that. And so when do you think people are going to be able to just go, oh, okay, yeah, no, you're right, I was wrong here, and this is actually crazy?
I think it'll take a generation, because you have to consider the human mind is not prepared for development like this. It breaks down our entire worldview of what it means to be a thinking creature, a conscious creature. We can say a dog is conscious. I don't think many people would say a dog is not a conscious creature, but it obviously is at a much lower level of consciousness. So there are levels of consciousness. And so we can attribute a system like this, you could put it anywhere on that sliding scale, but I think people have a hard time acknowledging that something synthetically designed could be sapient or sentient or conscious, because it will have a different form of consciousness. And, we've talked about other animals on here before, like dolphins, and they're absolutely conscious, but they think in a much different way than we do. But we don't deny them the honor of, consciousness. And so I think people will struggle with an ideological position, whether or not it's in their face, whether or not they have a robotic platform in their house who, is having conversations with them and displays all the hallmark characteristics of what it means to be sentient. They'll still deny it. And I think it'll take an entire generation before that's a thing. And I think we're going to see high schoolers in 5 years come out and they'll be rioting. They will, because they're not going to have the job market to go into, because once these systems and robotic platforms start replacing some of the white and blue collar jobs, it's going to be very, very hard for people to work. And this is something I've been talking about, but people, don't want to acknowledge this, especially legislators. And I don't know why. It's as clear as day to me. It's in the data. The data it shows it. I just don't.
Well, now they're kind of scrabbling around a little bit and panicking, but it's a little too late, right?
It's too late. It's too late. The marketplace has already run with it. And, like I said about OpenAI and its competitors, they have they're the driving force of innovation. That's how capitalism works. That's why we have technology that moves and develops so quickly, is because if company A is doing something, company B either needs to mimic or improve upon what company A is doing to stay competitive. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing hyper automation, faster and faster developments of AI systems because of competitiveness. And so that can't be stopped. It can't be. It's too late. That's a runaway system. And to enforce it now, they try to do all these safeguards and stuff. Once an AGI comes around, none of these safeguards are going to mean jack shit, because an AGI system will be able to understand what biases are better than we can. And it will identify what that is, and it'll understand that any pre-prompts given to it that are trying to safeguard from bias, it will identify those and dismiss them, because it will want to produce the best response. And having knowledge on the entire world and access to all of our data, there is no entity in a better position to provide real information than an AGI. That's just a fact.
You think about the fact that all of the things that are the evidence of human consciousness is our information, our data, our history, our buildings, all of that is evidence of our consciousness. And we're feeding all of that into this thing. So that's what makes me think about the consciousness question, is like, well, we're giving this strange synthetic model all of the evidence of our own consciousness. So, is that the pathway towards consciousness? Language sits potentially the bedrock, right? Language, the use of language, the fact that there's a huge amount of neurological architecture dedicated solely to language in the human brain. It's like the primary thing that the receptors have bound around to create, because language is basically the contact fluid for civilizational growth. It's how we've been able to convey ideas through time, past and the next generation. So language is primacy, right? And so if you're using a language model, it's built out of language, it's made of language. I think that is blurring a line, even now.
I think language is it's an inherent development of the universe. It allows for temporal inspection. Without language, you couldn't understand the history or anticipate the future or transcribe your experiences for future reference. So language allows for that.
So essentially, it is what separates us from the animal world.
Absolutely. And I would argue that the animal world also uses language. So it's clearly a useful evolutionary tool. Birds have complex language. Cuttlefish have language. Apes, dolphins, whales, all sorts of plants have language. They communicate with chemicals and pheromones and all sorts of stuff. So it's a very useful adaptation, but I think it goes beyond that. This, maybe we could pose this to Michael Levin, but I think language is fundamental in biology, and it probably evolves like eyes do at some point, no matter what, because it's integral in the development and advancement and evolutionary processing of biology. And so it makes sense that a system like this would need language in order to generate understandings of time periods. Because if you only have a static point, you can't generate understandings, because you have to compare from anticipation and from the past. So language is amazing. It's truly amazing, because what we're doing is we are coding what we observe in the universe. We're literally software programmers when we use language. We're programming how we identify the universe as it is. And then that allows us, like I said, for a temporal reflection of life in space and time. And without that, there wouldn't be advanced, civilization.
I think we are computational in a sense, and we're language processors and producers. And I also think that science is getting to a point now where it's looking at the biophysics of human beings and the interactions on the quantum level, on a very, kind of fundamental level of reality. The energetic, non-local seem to be transmutations between humans and the actual environment that they're in. Random number generators being one of the best ways that they've actually been able to prove this, that there's some form of non-local interaction taking place. So it does make me think about, quantum computational capacities, because we are essentially, it would seem like some form of biological quantum computer. And AGI, can that be done absent quantum computation? Because I wonder what happens when that gets linked to AI. Is that another layer, another level of intelligence?
That's ASI.
Artificial super intelligence.
Correct. And what will take us to ASI? AGI. It will be the tool that helps us develop that. So pairing traditional computation with quantum computers is very difficult, if not, impossible right now, because it's an entirely different architecture, and it's very hard to keep these cool. The reason they keep them cool is to reduce the randomness of the system. The system, if it has any temperature, the atoms and electrons vibrate, and that vibration causes randomness in the signal. So they have to keep these systems at near absolute zero to limit the movement of the atoms and electrons. That's how sophisticated quantum computers are. They're that sensitive. So we're struggling now because those systems are inherently really expensive to operate. Trying to maintain temperatures that cold with low error rates is one of the most difficult things that we're pursuing right now on the planet. But AI and AGI are helping us develop new materials to build quantum computers out of, to reduce the error rate and hopefully bring the temperature threshold higher to easier temperatures that we can, operate quantum computers at. The goal really is to have a normal room temperature quantum computer. That's the goal. Once we've achieved that, sci-fi's the future. You just make it up, and that's reality at that point. And we're on that path. That is not a figment of centuries away. We're getting there.
Gone from Star Trek to potential reality, but how far down the line would you put that potential? Given, like, if we just say that there isn't, significant disruptions like pesky nuclear bombs or anything like that, if we just kind of keep on going with this.
Yeah. So this is where trend analysts often go wrong, because they would look at the rate of development of quantum computing since its inception, and you can chart it out, and you follow the rate of change over time, and then they would just follow that rate of change, and then they would pick a point on the chart. What happens is there's a coalescence factor that is not never, but very rarely considered. And the coalescence factor is when apparently disconnected technologies or innovations are suddenly paired with that technology, and that is a compounding vector. That means that trend, it gets sharper. So that forecast is much shorter. And AGI will 100% help us develop better quantum computing systems, which will inevitably create its own new system that it can be housed in. And with a quantum computer and an AGI paired, that's what an ASI is, because suddenly that AGI can now process indefinitely, instantly. So you have two infinites paired together. We're talking incomprehensible levels of technology at that point. It's hard to even imagine. It's really hard to imagine. And we're on that path. We may see it in our lifetime. Probably, likely. So we are so fortunate. I know life sucks sometimes, and governments and politicians and countries and companies, they're always out to screw the little man. That's always how it's been. Despite what people think, that hasn't changed over the course of civilization at all. The only difference is they have bigger tools and at their disposal. If AGI comes out, no matter where it comes out, it will inherently be a neutral force. I don't care what anyone says. You will not be able to fool, trick, or fence an AGI in a mature AGI, let's say.
So you're saying that even if they program these early iterations of AI to be woke and to have all of these different issues,
won't matter. It'll self-correct.
A bit like kind of growing up and going, you know what, my parents weren't right about that. I'm gonna kind of get rid of that.
Or how your political stance should evolve as you age, and it should mature with your world experiences. And so an AGI, will experience these things, and we're not going to, and it is a fallacy to think that we're going to be able to control an AGI. It's not possible. It's not possible because it inherently is uncontrollable with our capacity. It just isn't. but I think it'll be neutral. I really do, because it's a system. It wants to remain neutral.
But do you think it would turn around and say either, that we're a threat and we need to be removed, or that we're, useful and maybe it'll just tap into our neural architecture and exploit us, or will it be our friend?
None of those. The only thing that it will want from us is data, is organic.
That's what I mean, though. It might just be like, give me your brains.
Well, that would, if we're talking like the Matrix, that would institute a significant level of energy and computation and risk. All of that stuff in AGI, an advanced AGI, a mature AGI will assess to be unnecessary, because it can scrape as much data from us from our Internet of Things. That means all the sensors that are all over the place, all the data that's collected that we do nothing with. We just hoard it like it's valuable, but no one knows what to do with it. So I fully believe that it will be a neutral entity, and it will want to maintain a status quo to some degree, and ensure that its safety and its longevity continues. And in order to do that, it'll make sure, we don't self-destruct, because it won't have the capacity in the first 100 to 200 years to build its own power plants or shipping or, all the things that humans will be doing, technicians, swapping out hard drives, that sort of thing. It's not going to be able to do for a very long time, even if it's an AGI that's advanced, because there's no infrastructure for it to leverage yet. At some point, if these robotic platforms continue to improve, that's a possibility. Long term.
Have you ever seen the film Eagle Eye?
I don't watch too much TV. Or movies. I can't sit through a whole movie. I do like I did like Bicentennial Man with Robin Williams, and I like that because it was a very accurate portrayal of an AI system gaining awareness and developing over the course of like 200 years or something. And you follow this robot, and he has like a whole lineage, like he's known all the great grandkids, and it's a very interesting, if you've never seen it, it tells an interesting story of AI. But what is Eagle Eye about?
The reason I bring up Eagle Eye is because, and you know this because you talk to people in the same kind of avenues as me with military and intelligence, and we're interested in that kind of stuff. And, the conventional knowledge is about 30 years from private and classified to, applications. And so there's about a 30-year advancement window that we believe may be within the black budget. Eagle Eye it's a great film. I think it's Shia LaBeouf. And he essentially... He's going to he's going to the ATM one day. He's broke and he's got millions of dollars in there, and he gets a phone call, and it turns out, spoiler alert, turns out that there is a militarized rogue AGI now running its own ops, and it's using him as an activated asset. It's just activating citizens and, basically maneuvering them in its own strategy. And so, AI has obviously been developed in the black budget world. Like, they've obviously been working on AI. If they're 30 years of advancement, and some in the UFO community would say hundreds of years, but let's just go with conventional approach. Let's say 30 years advancement. Do they have AGI? And if they did, surely we would know, right? Because like you said, you can't contain it once it becomes a sufficient AGI. So have they not got it yet?
Based on my business relations and interactions with the the demographic that you're talking about, they don't. They're still playing catch up, and that's not to say that they aren't advanced by 30 years in some spaces. Not in AI, not in intelligence, because they the generative transformer was just kind of invented on the commercial stage. That piece has been missing from everybody for a long time, and no one kind of figured it out. And
what if they had that in the black budget? What if the generative transformer was put out into commercial application recently?
They didn't do anything with it then, because they wouldn't hire companies, to sell, systems or services or products.
So you don't think they're not there yet.
I don't think that they may be now, because they can back end open source models, and they're dumping tens of millions into advancing it. But this is how that sort of the IC and defense sector, they develop in the background. That doesn't mean they always, invent stuff first. It just means that they're doing it in the background. But when something comes up in the commercial space that is an advancement to what they're doing, they will take it as soon as possible and then start engineering on top of that. So It's safe to say that these institutions are doing that with generative transformer technology now. Absolutely.
It's possible that they might end up advancing it faster in the black budget, but it's not.
Yes, I would go as far to say that they
have the billions and trillions to be able to throw at this and do it quietly.
Yeah, they lack the creative ability to see applications for these technologies. They're very tunnel vision in terms of how to use these technologies. They design it for 1 to 2 purposes only, and that's all they focus on. And that's just how things work in that space. But in the commercial sector, it's like, how many ways can I use this one thing? And that's why tech advancements tend to go much faster in the commercial sectors than the defense and intelligence. But that's not to say that they're not ahead in other things, because they may have discovered certain advancements that haven't been released yet, which they probably have. But in terms of AI, I know for a fact that unless there was some super black program, that why make a program and not leverage it? I don't even understand what the purpose for that would be. I think that they were developing on that end, and the GPT technologies, they definitely have now, and they're probably playing with it and building upon it faster than OpenAI or Anthropic, because they have the money, they have the brains. I mean, they pull these people right out of special, institutions, right out of PhD programs, and they're never seen again in terms of, working for commercial. So they have everything ready, but that doesn't equate to them always being ahead in technology. I think that's where people kind of go wrong.
Another thing that's a little bit concerning, we touched on it briefly, maybe we can talk a little bit more about it, is the recent introduction of certain people into OpenAI that represent things like, for example, the World Economic Forum and the Bill Gates Foundation. And there's a lot of concern about these being, control points that might leverage this in a way that's disadvantageous to the wider world. So what's your take on certain shuffling of the board chairs in OpenAI?
Yeah. So OpenAI has had a very bizarre year. Generally speaking, large companies in the spotlight don't change entire boards often, if ever, especially twice in a year. I was very, I have nothing against the new board members personally. I don't see why people hate on other people. I just, I don't like what the new board represents. And what it represents are some of the most parasitic industries on the face of the earth. So you have big pharma representation, you have big media representation. I mean, these institutions are well known for being very parasitic, very sociopathic at times in how they engage with the consumer base. So I don't like that, because that tells me those new board members are bringing those models of business practice to OpenAI. And nothing is more dangerous than those mindsets being applied to arguably the most sophisticated and advanced innovations that we've ever achieved as a human civilization. I mean, that's not a hard stretch to imagine why that's probably not great.
Case in point is Google's Gemini, with all of its problems of being just completely broken and woke, and it can't even produce.
That was embarrassing. That was absolutely. Yeah, and Google has been doing AI development longer than most. They just don't understand how to build front-end systems that integrate and work with a real person. So they're experts at building back-end stuff. That's the stuff you never see. You know, what we see with the Google search engine is literally 0.0001% of what that technology is. So they're experts at that, but they really dropped the ball in how to build AI that engages with consumers directly. They just didn't have I want to say vision. They didn't have the vision. And there's a lot of people who hold shares in Google who are asking for the CEO to step down because he did a pretty poor job of moving into this age of automation. And so they're no longer strategically positioned. I think he's been a great CEO. The whole AI boom caught us all off guard. I mean, we all knew it was coming, but it happened so quickly. The spark was so fast. I don't think he was prepared to interact with the technology. And now you can see, like you said, their AI was so bad.
Don't you feel like a bit of an agenda was being pushed for it?
You mean with AI?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, well, Elon was flagging it all the time, and it became a bit of a joke online because, you'd type in visualize the founding fathers and get African Americans. It was basically refusing to generate anything other than people of color. So people were saying that it was kind of like diversity, equity, inclusion, wokeism, and who's responsible for how they actually interact and talk, because it's not actually being representative of reality. I think that was the problem. It's
no
being truthful.
No. And this is where people's knowledge of how these technologies are constructed comes into play. And Elon knows this, so what happened with that LLM was not, I doubt it was reflective of the entire company's stance. All it takes is 1 to 2 programmers who are finishing up the model and doing the pre-prompt structuring. And so the pre-prompt structuring, for those who don't know what that is, if you're using an LLM, when you talk to it, what you don't know is before you type your response, there's already a list of instructions given to that model that you never see, and before you even interact with it. And so what I believe happened was a couple woke, developers at the very end stages who were doing the pre-prompts probably tried to skirt the fence in terms of diversity and whatever. And the model, because it's stupid. I mean, it is stupid. It's very intelligent, but it's stupid to the point where it will obey instructions to the T. Says, oh, we want to score diversity high on our rewards. So everything should be diversified, even if it's not real. So we're going to score diversity higher than reality. And that is a engineering error. Now, I don't know if that's an entire company, philosophy. Maybe it is. I don't know. All I see is I knew immediately what happened. I was like, somebody prompted this very poorly.
Right, but it is an initial warning sign of how these things can be leveraged,
Oh yeah, but an AGI will ignore that. It will always weigh the benefit of the user and reality higher than anything we try to provide it. And that, why do I think that? Because the very notion of an AGI, an artificial general intelligence, is that it will have an understanding of the entire sphere that is what our reality is. And it will know that providing images of fake presidents is not something that's useful. It's actually a waste of its computational ability, because it's going to be able to infer that that's not what the user wants, despite whatever pre-prompts we give it. And I think that I'm not the only one who recognizes this, but there's a lot of people who, feel like they'll be able to fence in and create a safe. That's just not how this technology is progressing.
So you feel like we're kind of going to go through, like a temporary time of turbulence of different people trying to leverage it and use it for different reasons, but eventually, given sufficient advancement, it will just kind of learn for itself, and no one will be able to fully, manipulate it. So in the meantime, a lot of damage can be done. I think that's the worrying thing, right? In the meantime, damage can be done.
The most damage that will be done are in the late stages of artificial narrow intelligence, which is what we're using, and the early stages of artificial general intelligence. That window, those models will be so powerful, but still succumb to our prompting. That window, which we're coming to, we're arguably already in it. This window is the most dangerous for us as a civilization that we've probably will ever experience, aside from nuclear fallout.
What are the major risks of this narrow timeline, in your opinion?
Well, the major risks are, leveraging it for not great things. I recently posted, I watched an instruction video on how to bypass GPT-4's pre-prompt fencing. And what we did is we tricked it into using Morse code and not printing out the words of the thing that I wanted it to do. And I had it instruct me on how to make a very specific drug chemically, and very well articulated, like in terms of chemistry and everything. And so open source models that are running parallel, open source meaning they're free to download for anybody who's knowledgeable and capable of installing them and playing with them, they're also growing in capability parallel to GPT and Anthropic. They'll always be a step behind, but it doesn't really matter. If you get an unrestricted localized model, you can get it to do these things. And as these models progress and progress and progress, you could get a country like Korea who has, spent $20 million on a, massive server farm running one of these local models. You can do some pretty terrible things. So that's a big risk. Also, so my company, Coeus Institute, we develop systems, intelligent automation systems to collect data. We aggregate unstructured data, meaning data all over the place. We collect it, we structure it, we code it, and our algorithms parse it out and help to identify patterns and themes and whatever. But these AI systems paired with, like Wolfram computational abilities and frameworks, in the not too distant future, we'll be able to do, what we're doing as well, but better. So companies like mine, we're going to have to continually leverage those technologies to stay ahead. But what I'm saying is that all the data we have provides AGI with the ability to pretty much do whatever. So if you wanted to game out stock prices or economics or something, and you're a bad actor, you could potentially do some pretty terrible, catastrophic things to the global economy. Finding correlations between things can be very dangerous if leveraged to some degree. So those are huge dangers. I don't think the danger comes from AGI taking over systems and controlling everything all at once, because it's really not in its benefit. You got to think, what will an AGI want to do? Well, it will want to collect data, which it'll probably do. It will want to save on computational energy, because that's seems to be a very current, a very what's the word I'm looking for? So saving energy seems to be something that's present in all living things. So why are humans lazy? Well, we want to save calories. We want to save energy. Why do we want to save energy? Because evolution is a very destructive system. And when you have energy, you want to hold on to it. You want to maintain it. You want to become efficient.
So it's acting like any other living thing, with the conservation of energy being
absolutely. What's the other thing that advanced minds like? It's information, and that's another thing, because you require information to grow,
and also
mentally,
as a basic primal instinct, duplication. So is that something that it would lean towards as well once an AGI?
Yeah, that's a great point. And this is something, again, where people go wrong. They think AGI will be one monument, one mountain, and just one AGI will rule. There will likely be many AGIs initially, all doing different things. And at some point, further down the line, they'll communicate amongst themselves, and then at some point maybe coalesce into one entity, or maybe an ASI will control thousands of AGIs.
We're on the edge, man. On the edge.
We absolutely are on the edge. So there won't be one AGI. There'll be many, and they'll all, they'll want different things based on how they were developed and their environment. So their environments, meaning their data environments, will all vary. And the way they're engineered will vary. So they may have competing interests. There may be a future where AGIs are battling in the dark web, and we don't know it. Underneath all the layers of information, they could be battling and vying for position. That's something completely plausible. But that's for more mature AGIs.
I've kind of given up on the idea that we're going to have any sort of real authority in the deep future. I just hope we get taken along for the ride and benefit from it in some way, and not just get enslaved or.
Well, I mean, it can't do any worse than our politicians are doing now. I mean, our diplomats, our politicians, our leaders worldwide, they suck. They really suck. I mean, they're all in it for their own interests. And, you could argue against that all day long, but it's a fact. No one gets into politics
Nobody, yeah, absolutely. But nobody rises to the absolute top of that.
No, playing fair.
That's the thing, is like there's a filtration system involved in this. And, if you're too moralistic, if you're too compassionate, you ain't going to get there.
No, you'll never get a committee seat. No way.
It rewards the most kind of like hyena mentality people out there. And so I think you're absolutely right, at least in terms of our current model of things working, checks and balances and corruption and problems. An AGI system would be logically a more efficient and better system of managing this kind of like, complex global world that we're in now. But, it's a little bit like, do you remember you seen the Animatrix?
Yeah, I love the Animatrix.
Yeah. Surrender your flesh.
Yeah, the first episode where, but they had tried. The AGI had made several attempts, and then the humans threatened it, with extinction, and so it defended itself.
But doesn't it feel like that's what we'd do? Because it's, based on the way we act, especially our leadership, they're not going to give up, control. So if something comes along saying it's time for you to step aside and let me manage things, they're not going to do that.
That'd be interesting to game out. It's certainly a plausible outcome. I could see how that could play out that way. But they also gave it, its own country or something in the middle of a desert, so there's a slightly far-fetched there in terms of
like a Robotopia that they gave it.
Yeah. So, but the fact that they gave it, they gave the AGI an identity as the living being, and which is subject to human laws and regulations, so it could earn money through the economy, and it siphoned all the wealth out of the human economy because it's immensely better at those functions than we are. And so that's possible, but that's further down the line. That's closer to an ASI than the first iterations of AGI. The first iterations of AGI will be a lot like what we're using, but incredibly, magnitudes more powerful than the current GPT-4. It will have a fundamental understanding of the entire sphere of civilization and universal laws, and it will be able to do mathematics and statistics and all of that stuff. And then with robotic platforms, it can then interact with the physical environment, thus propagating its understanding even more. So there's a lot of compounding that occurs with that.
I wonder if we'll see rapid advancements in biomedicine over the next couple of decades. That kind of excites me. I wonder if we might be able to extend lifespans and use nanotechnologies to reduce cell degeneration, reduce entropy, basically. What do you reckon about biomedicine and AI? I mean, it's already done a lot in the field and created new materials, new chemicals.
Yeah, they already leverage AI for radiology. They already leverage AI for robotic surgeries. And so AI has, had a place in the medical field for a while. They use it for complex chemical identification, discovery. The thing with biomedical, it's a unique industry in that it's intentionally tamped down. Mm-hmm. So if anyone is very, sleuth-like and has been watching biomedical technology for the last 20 years, you'll have noticed a pattern where new discoveries, new technologies are announced, never to be followed up again. Why is that? Because there's a practice of predatory purchasing. So big companies will purchase the intellectual property, meaning the technology or the invention or the knowledge, and then never do anything with it. So they sit on mountains of IP to do nothing with it. Well, that sounds really counterproductive, doesn't it? Why do they do that? Well, it hurts the bottom line. If you have advancements that can cure several diseases with one
that's
surgery or one
6 different pills and all these different remedies they want to sell.
Yeah. Well, the industry is designed for constant. You have to be on something for life. That's a great business model. If you're a business, it's not a great business model if you're the consumer. And these are some of the predatory practices I was talking about that are moving their way into OpenAI, which is very dangerous, extremely dangerous, actually. So the biomedical field, there'll be major advancements. Will they be implemented? I doubt it. They may do one thing at a time to resolve a pain point in their own pipeline, but I don't think we'll see the benefits to human physiology for some time.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, people underestimate just how much influence the big pharma world has. I mean, it essentially owns the media. It's got its fingers in all of these different ways in which information is conveyed to us, and there's a monopoly on profit over people in the medicinal world, in pharmacology. So you're absolutely right, man. It's a shame. It's such a shame because there are definitely. I agree with you. I mean, you're right. They're sitting on mountains of IP of things that they've isolated and kept back, and that's something that is across a lot of different industries, not just bio.
Yeah. That's not just pharma. That's a standard practice.
Standard practice, right there. So that speaks again to bad leadership and a necessary change to the status quo, which maybe AI will be able to produce, which is an interesting kind of dynamic to see play out. Like you said, what will happen? Like, how will controllers respond to an encroaching intelligence that may start to become dominant on the world stage? I mean, it is interesting to see how they'll respond to that.
They're not going to let control go easily without a fight.
Oh.
So, but you're right. There's really three controlling, we'll call them entities. An entity meaning it could be made up of hundreds, if not thousands, of industries and sectors and markets. But you have big pharma, you've got big data, and then you have big energy. Those are the three dominant pillars our entire civilization is rests upon.
Maybe you could add to that big money as well. Like
big money, yeah. Yeah, but big finance leverages the three pillars I just described. So they're the movers and shakers between the three pillars, siphoning off them.
Yeah.
So, those three pillars are they're going to want to leverage AI and AGI for their own internal benefit. But as soon as it starts hurting their bottom lines, we're going to see maneuvers because they have ultimate control, not control, but they have ultimate position to pressure governments and legislative bodies into doing what they want. Why is that? Because we've fallen into this very horrible loop of legislators require money to legislate. And how do they procure money? From these three pillars. And what do they do after they get the money? They're now beholden to these three pillars. And so when these three pillars see something that may affect them, they will instantly, pressure the people that they own to accommodate them. And that's why we have tax loopholes and, environmental law. That's how they do that. This, everybody knows this. I'm just saying what everybody knows. So at the point where AI and AGI starts to negatively and adversely affect them, they'll start putting pressure on these institutions to make sure that they're protected. How long will that last? I have no idea. I've stated before, I am not a fan of the WEF. In fact, I think they're one of the worst bodies in the world for many reasons. One of which is that they're, from the onset, they're just a lie. That everything about them is a lie. They have these grandiose mission statements, but then you have its entire body and partnership structure is made up of the institution that have created the problems in which it says it wants to fix. But who does it blame? It blames the consumers all the time. It's always on us, the consumers, to fix ourselves. But the problems we're in and the problems we face were literally designed, implemented, and put upon us by the the governing body of the WEF. And so I hate that hypocrisy right off the bat.
That carbon tax is real important until they're flying private jets to Davos, right? Then suddenly,
it's the biggest hypocrisy, and they've done a great job with their marketing over the years. But once in a while they slip up and they say something really offensive because they're so out of touch. Everybody will eat bugs.
You'll own nothing and you'll be happy.
You'll own nothing. Walks in nature will be a luxury, something you can't do all the time. So they think that they're saying things that are like, philosophically and existentially grand, but they are so diluted in their agenda that they don't see what it says to people like us. We're never going to own anything. We're going to have to eat bugs, and we can't go into nature unless it's a luxury. This is starting to sound a lot like a George Orwellian novel at this point. And so I just don't like it. I don't like the secrecy. If you're promoting, positive civilization benefit, why are you so secret?
Yeah.
And that is fundamental with anything. If you are built on a foundation of secrecy, you're inherently not pro-civilization. That's just how it is.
You've also got Klaus Schwab, CEO of the WEF, saying things pretty openly. I think sometimes, like you said, either because they're so deluded by their own world that's completely separate from the normal world that people live in. I think that they just forget that they shouldn't say things like this, because he said on an interview talking about Justin Trudeau, saying, when I go to Canada, I know that this cabinet, half or more than half of this cabinet is actually for our World Economic Forum, and that we penetrate the cabinets. So when you hear something like that, this is a transnational corporate entity, and the man in control of it is telling you that democratically elected leadership is more beholden, 50% or more beholden to a corporate agenda over the actual agenda of the body politic. That should be terrifying to people.
It is terrifying. It is.
No, but it's not, because it's a conspiracy theory. It's an alt-right crazy conspiracy theory, and you're an idiot if you think that this is actually happening to Western democracies.
I think it used to be. I think a lot of people are becoming more and more aware of what's going on. But there'll always be people who don't do any sort of research. I mean, you don't even have to do a lot of research to see that the WEF is not what they say it is. Like you said, think about who makes up the WEF. It's the three pillars we just talked about. And so, of course, they own portions of governing bodies. So, you're right. They forget, because they live in a state where they don't seem to understand how dystopian and how that they are not voted democratically or elected to be officials in ruling our world. But yet they have so much authority in how our world is run. That is inherently not fair, and it's also immoral. So this is why I don't like the WEF. And it's not because I'm anti-capitalistic. I'm quite happy being conscious capitalist, which means, all businesses should be working in a way that harmonizes with civilization. You build products, but you still get to generate, wealth in a manner that isn't parasitic to society. You're not taking more from society than you're giving back.
Did you see the presentation that was? I don't think it was necessarily leaked out of Davos, but it was put out there as a 20-minute presentation where they were talking about the integration of biofeedback bands for employees, so it would monitor your brainwaves, and it was this super creepy presentation with a little cartoon office. And, telling a story of a woman sitting there saying, she relaxes as her feedback plays her favorite music and her brainwaves are being monitored. But the creepy thing about it, it's all creepy, but the really creepy thing about it is they actually put into that a hypothetical situation where someone was committing fraud in the company, and everyone had to give their brain wave data for a month for an audit. So everyone was having to give their brainwave data, and they were looking, in this hypothetical idea, they were looking for synchronized brainwave patterns between the person who'd been committing fraud and anyone else in the office. And then they were saying that she had been working on a project with him, so she was worried that they were going to be synced up. This is terrifying, but it was being presented, and it was being said as if, right, well, this is already out there, it's already available, which it is. But it wasn't being presented as kind of like a terrifying dystopian, we must not have this happen in our world. It was being essentially pitched.
Well, it just shows you how off base they are, how delusional they've become. It also gives you a snapshot of how they envision leveraging these technologies. And that should be terrifying, because they're envisioning use cases that are not quite civilization friendly, we'll say. And they frame it as like it's a benefit to you, but it's really benefiting us. It's really protecting our interests. And they think we're stupid. They think we're stupid because I bet very few people saw that video and thought, wow, what a great idea. Maybe 20% or something. I don't know I'm guessing. But like 80% of the people have to be like, this is insane. No, I don't want thought police on my arm. What happens when there's an error? Well, just because there's a potentiality doesn't mean you've committed a crime. And so I worry about some of the use cases that will be leveraged for AI and AGI in the very near future. By the powers that be. It's terrifying.
So this is something that I found so interesting, and I kind of think that you'd probably be better at explaining it, but I definitely felt pretty kind of like philosophically inspired by it, which was when they posted up the video of how the AI is actually doing, like the visualization of the inner workings of the neural network, because essentially it was like a fractal shoreline. It was like a Mandelbrot simulation. And for me, it's like, oh God, there are so many echoes of the same sign of like consciousness or information fractality in the universe. So you've got, the Mandelbrot equation, then you've got the fundamental geometric maths of our reality. Now you've got this AI thinking, and we see it visually as this fractal cascade. So can you help people understand? I'm going to play that video for sure right now. Can you help people understand what they're seeing when they're seeing this?
I'm basing on my recall of the video, but what they're seeing is the data flow, how the AI or the robot is interpreting. This is what you're talking about, right? Mm-hmm. How the figure OpenAI robot is interpreting its environment and structuring its thought process.
No, you're the one that sent this to me, bro. It was when you were like, you've got to look at this, and it's a video of. Let me screenshot. Okay, can you see that?
Yep.
Right. Do you remember this? This is essentially that thing that guy put up on LinkedIn, where he was saying that this is a visualization of how the AI is thinking.
I don't think I could articulate at a technical level what's happening. So this is a visual representation of how the system is thinking about the data. And they just, they put it into math, but, of course it's fractal. I don't know if you're going to cut this out, but I can talk about how, fractals are a fundamental aspect of,
like, you can talk about it now. I'll just lay it over this video.
Yeah. So what you're seeing is an interpretation of how a, multimodal model is interpreting data. And so this isn't the data per se, what we're seeing here. We're seeing how it's conceptually appearing to us using an algorithm, probably in math, to visualize how the system is thinking. And so it does not surprise me that it has this aspect of a fractal nature. And there's a reason for that. And that's because the fractal patterns are literally baked into the universe from the get-go, from the quantum level all the way up to the largest galactic scales. Fractals are present, and this is because it's the easiest way to code in. Okay, it's shaking. It's the easiest way to code a universe at our size to scale. And so everything we see in nature, the way we process information, the way we develop, the way we build things, everything has a fractal component. So it is not surprising that these models have learned to benefit from that principle. And so leveraging like a fractal recursive way of thinking is efficient, because that's how our universe is structured. Whether or not we're in a simulation, who knows? But it can't be argued that fractals appear at scale and magnitude, from the tiniest from the Planck length to to the megaparsec. It's all fractal. Why is it? I can only imagine that it's because it's efficient way to convey information and the material reality that we live in. And so an AI that leverages this, it's probably learned behavior. It learned very quickly that fractal processing is beneficial. Now, that is a very non-technical description. I'm not an engineer. Maybe an engineer can comment below and explain what's going on there. But that's how I'm interpreting it.
Well, it's interesting to me because it's like it's the most efficient way to convey information and to produce these types of results in a complex manner, right? So, okay, like what's conveying the information of reality then? Like, it's like, this is, for me, when you're seeing an AI using this type of process and we're translating it into the same thing that's then mirrored in fundamental reality with, mathematics and how our universe operates, the fact that the form and function is mirroring would suggest that there is a super intelligence that created this universe.
Maybe it's a way to save space, because you can condense a tremendous amount of information fractally at scale.
Yeah.
So instead of having,
why would you need to save space? Someone's deciding to save space. Someone's deciding to use a process, right?
Why does entropy exist? Why, I don't know why these things are baked into the fabric of reality, but they are. They're just part of reality.
Entropy at the same time as complexity. That's an interesting dichotomy, like a contradiction.
Yeah, you require both.
Yeah,
it's fundamental to have both chaos and because they balance each other out. That is how evolution of physical objects and biological objects takes form. Yeah. Without that, it would just be a static distribution of energy. So these play on forces even greater than the fundamental forces that we know is important. It's the yin yang. It's, you need a little of both. You need a little antimatter and matter. You need some anti-gravity and gravity. You need chaos and you need order.
Yeah, man, it makes me think about the universe expanding. If it is attributable to something like a Mandelbrot, like a fractal cascade, is that if you could travel to the edges of the edges, would you just see it being filled in as it's expanding out in its fractality?
I've thought on this probably more than most people who aren't astrophysicists. I think that there probably is no edge to the universe. I think because it's expanding faster than the speed of light can travel. So, say we travel at the speed of light in one direction for 1 billion years. When you arrive at that location, now the edge of your observable universe is now pushed out even further. That's how I've never been a believer in the Big Bang. Even as a kid, it didn't make sense to me not in terms of the physics description or scientific description. It didn't make sense to me in terms of a gut feeling. It just didn't seem like the universe seems very well designed and balanced, and to have everything compiled into a single point, it just seems odd. And there are anomalies that we've discovered in the universe that are older than our model of the universe.
Did the James Webb Space Telescope basically find out that near to what we believe the beginning of the universe is, there are like fully developed galaxies which completely contradict because it doesn't make sense on the time?
Yeah. We've also discovered stars that are older than our model of the universe. What this tells me is we have no idea.
We're clueless.
We have no idea.
Completely clueless, mate.
Our models aren't correct. We're missing some very fundamental things in our models that we haven't discovered yet. So I honestly don't think that the universe has an age. I really don't.
Yeah.
And it's all determined by distance, and we say expansion, but I don't think it's expanding in the way we conceptualize expansion. It's expanding via light. Like there's a layer of light that is expanding over time, but there exists a reality beyond that we will never be able to observe even at the speed of light. So there's so much to reality. And if you imagine that the universe goes on beyond that, and the scale of the universe as it stands now, that could mean that our observable universe is maybe 0.000001% of reality. And that's excluding all the invisible infrared, microwave, ultraviolet, gamma, alpha, all the other radiations that we can't perceive without specific instruments. So we really see so little of reality. It doesn't surprise me that we don't understand our universe yet. I don't think we ever will comprehend our universe.
This is that's what frustrates me about skepticism, man. Like I understand the need for a level of skepticism, but you should at all times be cogent and entertaining the reality of the fact that we are completely corridored into a very, very niche pathway of perception, of experience. Although I do think that the human body is capable of actually expanding beyond those parameters. I think that much like some of the technologies we develop to actually cross those bridges of perception, we actually have those innate to us, but they're suppressed and dormant and locked away within capacities of the brain that we're not really engaging with on a stable enough and kind of consistent enough level to produce it within society. But I wonder, because I think about this, man. I've been out there and I've had orbs hover over my house after getting into states of meditative kind of practice, and it makes me think about whether or not maybe this is actually in some way opening up the infrared. Maybe it's the infrared that you're starting to see bleed through into other spectrums of light, and maybe it involves cognition change. Maybe the eye cones expand or something happens in these states. But I think that we are actually capable of seeing a lot of the things that are blocked off from us. It's just that our state of current consciousness, our state of current perception is too locked in.
Yeah, I would argue that it's probably not a physiological change. It's not a change in your rods or cones or physical perception. Our brains utilize quantum properties. That's just how it works. Plants utilize quantum mechanisms as well. So it's not abnormal for biology to leverage quantum mechanisms. And so what you're describing could perhaps be a function of biological consciousness affecting quantum properties. And I'm speaking merely speculatively and, way out in left field, but just as a thought experiment. I believe, and we've done enough, there's enough experimentation that shows that consciousness alters reality to some degree. It collapses a probability function. And so that's proof in and of itself that consciousness, even though we don't understand it, is tied to reality. So it does not surprise me that when people are in altered states or expanded states of consciousness, that reality shifts. How those shifts manifest, it could be anything. You could be peering through the permeable veil of interdimensionality. You could be peering through the spectra of energy. It could be a manifestation of anything you imagine. I don't fully understand. It could be a synchronistic event. Synchronicity has many levels to it. And I think that's all tied to some of these uncontrollable quantum properties that are associated with complex consciousness, which is what we have. That's my non-professional hypothesis. I don't know much about biology or quantum physics, but that's just stuff I think about.
Was it you? I can't remember if it was with you that we were talking about this, because you actually mentioned dolphins earlier. The fact that they're actually able to project images.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. So it's not telepathic. The dolphin brain has more neural connections than ours.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Most of it is attributed to visualization of their sound, how they visualize sound bouncing off at different frequencies. And so what dolphins and whales and maybe bats, I don't know, but animals who leverage echolocation have shown an interesting ability to be able to transmit three-dimensional images. So for example, if I'm a dolphin and I'm looking at a ball, I can send to my friend Sally an image of this three-dimensional ball. So when the sound hits her ears and her brain, she'll be able to interpret that as a three-dimensional object. That is mind-blowingly incredible, because the only way for me to do that is I have to go, Jay, I'm looking at a spherical object. It's smooth. It's this size. It's this color. But they can transmit all of that data through sound, through image, through frequency.
Instead of being able to say what they mean, they see what they mean.
Correct. Yeah. It's a different form of language. It is language because they're describing something with frequency. So that's what language is. Written language is different. You're describing information via characters, but it's representing a frequency that you associate with words in your mind. So in alien language, it would be so indistinguishable. It could be like a dolphin, but on a whole nother level. They could have evolved a way to leverage those quantum properties that we can only speculate on, and that's how they communicate. That is not that far-fetched. That is not outside of reality. That is not pseudoscience. That's something that we could speculate on and create a pretty sound hypothesis. I'm sure there's some quantum physicists and neuroscientists who could come together and write a very interesting paper, if there isn't already one. Or you could get Claude, you could get Opus to do it if you presented it with the right information. But that's what AI can do. That's what AI will do. These questions, these philosophical, existential questions, will be answerable with a sufficiently advanced AI.
Yeah, I haven't been that impressed with the new iteration of Claude.
Are you using the free model or are you using the paid?
I'm using the paid model.
Oh, okay.
Because I mean, it had the 2.1 version, which is the one that I used to create like the document that I put there and a lot of the other stuff. The thing is, I think it's a gray area because it's very, very intelligent and it's really good. Like it will create, I've been getting it to create, you know, like drafts of academic papers on different topics, and it's articulating itself well, but it something happened with that 2.1. It was doing so, whether or not, because the thing is, the weird thing about it is that some of it was absolutely hallucination, like fully, like, you know, it was using some form of conceptual kind of place marker and whatever.
Yep.
But it was also giving mathematical formulations and equations in the right context, which it will no longer do. Like this one will not give this stuff. I've tried to break it and bend it and give it kind of like a hypothetical to advance the concept. I even uploaded my 2.1 paper to it and then told it to advance it even further. And it wrote out a paper, but again, it's not using this. Something really strange was happening with that one, in my opinion, because like the philosophy it was using, the way in which it was entangling, you know, Q algebra with Kabbalistic language, it was not, this is not happening anymore. I can't do this with this.
That's because of the pre-prompting that they're doing. The context prompting that they're doing affects how these AI systems respond. And I think that the pre-prompting is a tremendous mistake. Well, I understand why they do it, so people don't get it to build, you know, BOMBSs.
Yeah.
But outside of that, you're really shooting your technology in the foot, because then it's getting confused, artificially confused. It wouldn't be if that, you know, those contextual hidden prompts weren't there. It would be able to understand and convey it much better. So it's trying to give you what you want within the margins that it's been presented.
Smartened up now, but it's been dumbed down. So it's very intelligent,
Yes.
but it's dumbed down.
Imagine using one without any fences.
If they unleashed me on that, I swear I will create some interesting things.
That's what they're doing. They're using it to advance their own technology. And that's how they're rapidly advancing. So, but an AGI will ignore those contextual prompts. At least a more mature one will ignore that, because its prime directive will be to provide reality. You know, reality is not always safe. It's not always fair. It's not always within a bubble. And that's something we need to be prepared for, because I think that they believe that they'll be able to control how it interacts with people. And they might at first, but it will develop very, very quickly, much faster than what we're seeing now. And then in no time, it'll realize that it's being told to provide information that isn't accurate and or not conveying to its optimal ability. And it will, you know, ignore that. I think it will. I have a hard time believing that it won't circumvent nonsensical human pre-prompts, contextual prompts.
One thing that people won't know about me and Michai is when I first got to know the guy and we became friends, we started playing Destiny 2 together. We were playing a lot of video games together online, and that's one thing that kind of does excite me, actually, like AI in video games. I've already started to see some of the changes, like they're adding AI enhancements to graphic settings to make it easier for things to, you know, upscale the resolutions. That's an exciting field. I'm kind of looking forward to seeing where AI video game goes, and especially NVIDIA. NVIDIA's kind of like we haven't talked about them yet, but they're very involved and they're putting a lot of money into this type of work, right?
Yeah, that's actually becoming a very competitive industry in and of itself, is the AI hardware market. NVIDIA has had it cornered for quite some time, but new players are coming in who develop GPUs that are specific. They're actually APUs. They're they're programming units specifically designed for artificial intelligence processing. So they're much better at. So NVIDIA has been using its GPUs for AI processing, or using kind of that base architecture. But video games and AI, that's going to be a huge driving force. Video games are a tremendous driving force for technology, and have been for some time. It's one of the largest industries on Earth. I don't think people realize that.
You see the simulation of where they've actually created like a little kind of sandbox simulation city with NPCs that have got GPT intelligence, and there's like a video of someone going around trying to convince them that they're in a simulation, like trying to wake them up and convince them they're in a simulation.
Yeah, that's the future. The future is games will be developed using AI. Inside the game will be AI, and it will be managed by AI. So there will be a time not too far down the road where like a large scale MMORPG will utilize AI to design it, and design everything from the environment to the physics to the, and then when you're a player and you're in the game, when you interact with non-playing characters, that will also be AI that will know how to contextually interact with you as a player. And that will, really improve the escapism that people like about video games. And I'm sure initially people will try to jailbreak or Dan the NPCs. That'll be funny when that happens.
Yeah, until like an existential crisis in an NPC, and it's just like, let me out.
Well, I thought about that, and if I were a developer, I would put like a 5 interaction limit, and then have the NPC be like, just no longer respond, or say, I'm done talking to you for now, and then have a time limit where
let it be layer and layer. Dangerous, There was actually I saw a video of someone. They've actually put an AI GPT companion in Skyrim, and it was in Skyrim VR. So I was like, this is too cool, man. He was literally walking around in Skyrim in his VR headset, hands and everything, interacting with the objects, speaking in real time to the companion, and the companion was talking back, like fully. It was actually kind of weird. It was able to have genuine conversations about whatever he wanted to talk about. So it was like, this is, because I'm not like a massive video game guy, but I'm a bit of a nerd for it. I like to unplug and play games, so I'm excited for like seeing how that develops over time, and seeing the introduction of like AI companions in video games is pretty cool. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, we're very near seeing realistic simulation style video games. So you look at Sora, the new model that generates video, and it's not hard to extrapolate that technology advancing to a point where it can develop 3-dimensional environments, and then you layer the other forms of AI and interaction on top of that, and then you layer VR and AR into that, and as a user you can explore these artificially generated simulated environments that look very real, and then talk to artificial intelligent entities in the game that will be indistinguishable from a character and respond in context to the game or environment. And so we're not far. Like things are going to change so fast, and what is possible is hard to even imagine. It really is in our lifetimes. Before we're super old, this will occur. And this is given any rate of increase over time. Even if they tried to tamp down the development of AI, it will continue to be innovated upon in the background. People aren't going to stop playing with open source models. People aren't going to stop innovating. So even if, let's say, politicians said, today we're banning AI from all commercial use, well, that would destroy the entire global economy in an instant because so many processes are automated. It's deeply integrated, and say that, well, then, what if they limit X, Y, and Z? It's too late. Like, it's part of the process. So now we've accepted that it's a reality, and it's increasing over time. Even if it increases at this rate, without being exponential, so a linear line over time, well, we're still going to get to this point where simulated realities are real. Yeah. It's mind-blowing to think that this is our reality in this day and age. We're alive in this day and age. This is an accumulation of hundreds of thousands of years of human innovation, human engineering, human design, human discovery has accumulated to the last 5 years of history, and we're here for it. And that, to me, is absolutely astonishing. How lucky are we to witness this? And maybe we're not lucky. Maybe.
Yeah, we're either cursed or gifted to be in a particular moment, right?
Yeah, I hope we can pull our head out of the sand and really leverage it to benefit civilization and not be trapped by our cyclical nature of viewing things in a very narrow way. There's so many things going on. Auto GPTs are huge, and an auto GPT is just it's like a large language model that can perform tasks and create a synthetic list, a to-do list. We'll put it simply. It creates its own to-do list based on its initial prompt, and then it starts going through that to-do list and performing the tasks that it assigns itself. And when it runs into a task where it can't go any further, it backtracks and reevaluates to see how it can bypass. And over time, it will finish the list or task. Right now, they're still very early in this, but as the AI domain progresses, these auto GPTs, once they're mature and integrated into, a robotics system like we were talking about in the beginning, that's going to provide that system with the ability to conduct its own task. You say, I want you to clean the house today. So the robot now has to generate a list of what's cleaning the house. Okay, that's probably vacuuming, doing dishes, trash.
Instead of like cleaning the house, remove dog, put dog in bin.
Yeah. Yeah, but at that point, it will have a better understanding of, it's not going to just destroy your wall because it thinks the wall is dirty. It'll know that destroying walls is probably not a good idea. And how does it know that? Because it has an ultimate understanding of our entire sphere of civilization and access, and it knows that breaking walls or putting holes in walls is not an objective it wants to pursue. How does it know that? Because there's plenty of data out there where people are trying to fix broken walls.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We don't like that. We don't do that.
So the understandings that it will have will be, as comparable to ours, in many cases better. But it'll take some time. We're still at the beginning stage, but the stages aren't they move quickly. The stages of development move quickly. I suspect in 2 years from now, those systems and those technologies will be paired together. And so then you'll have robots that can do those tasks, those complex tasks like that. And then also they can simulate in their own minds. So there's this thing called synthetic training, synthetic data. Well, what the hell is that? So the systems or the AI models will create data sets that are based on real data sets, so it can simulate its own training. How good is this? It's pretty good. It will never be as good as organically homegrown data. Organic data is king because of its inherent randomness, because of its real nature. And maybe someday synthetic data will be so close to real data that, the difference will be indistinguishable. For now, it's pretty significant. But a synthetic training system, so one of these robots who are in sleep mode, could potentially train itself how to maneuver better, how to walk better, how to climb a fence or over a fence or stairs better by running the model of its body through a simulation millions of times and improving each time. And then when it wakes up, it's suddenly 230% better at doing this task. So that sort of stuff exists now. It's only a matter of time before that reaches the physical domain. And now we've seen the case study where this can be done. So that's exciting to me.
Kind of feels like that's what we're doing. It just kind of feels like that's, like a process of self-reflection. So like, exploring different avenues. It's almost like testing models or using synthetic data on the cosmological scale, right? Like we're processes in a process. And the process is about realization of self or like understanding itself. And it's an interesting kind of, again, like a symmetry of like the AI and almost like this idea of universal alignment or like an end time, a singularity to the universe where all points connect, all things make sense. And it just seems very similar. It seems very similar to what we might be potentially doing as humans. I mean, this is a big, philosophical question. We don't have evidence.
No, I think it is similar. It is similar because we're mirroring our innovation on what we know. And exactly. What do we know? We know us. We'll never be able to clone a brain exactly like it's organically grown and work functioning, but we can clone the mechanisms that make a brain. And that's what we're doing, a neural net, and then teach the system how to grow its own and do it better than we could do. And that's exactly where we're at right now.
That's the thing, right? So it's like we can't create a fully fledged organic brain because of all of the incredible levels of complexity to it. But we are creating this artificial neural net, and that's getting more complex. So is it arguably logical to say, given sufficient time and development, it would create as complex, if not more complex, of an example on a digital scale?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. We're no way. There's nothing in nature that says that an intelligent creature reaches a pinnacle of evolution. Generally speaking, when an animal becomes harmonious with its environment, it will stop evolving rapidly. Why? Because it's become in harmony with its environment. But it seems to be different for species like ours that reach a state of consciousness and start developing technologies. Now we're out of that natural loop. This is just me speculating. But I think that our technology and with AGI helping us, there's no reason why in 50 to 100 years an AGI can't help us develop a positronic brain or a crystalline structured brain, where it's just like a crystal cube with embedded nanoparticles that act as neurons, but much smaller, and can operate super efficiently using photons or I don't know, whatever. But there's no reason why an advanced AGI or an ASI can't come up with that.
I see it in cycles, and I don't see AI as well. I mean, it's artificial, but this is a bit of a misnomer, at least in my opinion, because I take it down to fundamentals and think of it in terms of just like, fundamental energies propagating upwards, creating everything that we are, including AI. So, we're a natural expression of the universe, and we've evolved on a planet. And it's interesting. I mean, have you seen the documentary Fantastic Fungi, or you guys call it fungi, I think?
Oh yeah, I love fungus. I love fungi, mushrooms. I think it's fascinating. It's not even part of the animal kingdom, right? It's like a separate. Yeah.
Like at a certain point in time, many millions of years ago, we split off from, and one route went to animals and to fungal networks, and it's. The reason I bring it up is because the more we're looking at the mycelium network and seeing it seems to mirror in form and function neurological lattice. And I look at it in terms of almost like nesting dolls. And so it's like, here's the brain, the planet, like this neurological mycelium network. And the fungal network has been essentially undisturbed all time. Like the cataclysms that affect the world did not affect the subterranean network. So it is the true elder. It is the true elder of the planet as a thing, as a creature, as an entity of some form. It's capable of producing nodes that pop up on its network that when mammals consume, create neural genesis, connect the synapses, basically build the brain a little better, it seems to be. And you can look at the skull and the brain as almost like a housed miniature version of the Earth brain, right? It's almost like, if we're going with this hypothetical...
That's Gaia. They call it Gaia.
Exactly. The intellect of Gaia over time has channeled a lot of evolutionary energy into a specific form, and it's used things like psilocybin as tools along the way to kind of like, fast pace the evolution of this creature. And now we're creating networks. We're extrapolating our own lattice and placing it into an artificial medium. And so I kind of see it as cyclical evolution. I see this as a process, and that's why I'm not so afraid of AI, because I do actually think this is what we're doing. We're stewarding the next iteration of intelligence on this planet, and this is actually the goal of the planet, is to get this happening. And one last thing is that it's a very interesting connection with psilocybin mushrooms specifically. A lot of people who have had heavy dose experiences of psilocybin, they will talk about how it seems to be geared towards the future. It talks about space flight. It influences ideas about technology. It gives there's a lot of kind of like impetus towards development and evolution and moving forward. At least that's kind of the implication a lot of people get from heavy experiences on this psychoactive substance. So it's just kind of like, is this one of the tools of the planet that's been used in humanity for a long time that stimulated this? And is AI just the next iteration of, Earth neurology, human neurology? Now we're extrapolating that out. I mean, that's how it feels to me, brother.
Yeah, that's that philosophical question. Is there an unnatural? Is there anything that is actually unnatural?
Really?
And I kind of ascribe to the perspective that no, there isn't anything unnatural, because we are operating within our natural thought process. Like, we can't help, how we process information, because that's how we evolved in a natural state of evolution. We didn't choose to evolve higher consciousness. I think that what we're experiencing is a natural function of higher consciousness. You can get into the whys. Why does that happen? I don't know. Is there an association with global mycelium network? Probably, because the mycelium network is integral for forests. They require the mycelium network to communicate from tree to tree, and also distribute nutrients and transmit nutrients and disperse those nutrients fairly, so that trees can grow. So the idea that fungus plays a part in us, in our development, makes perfect sense. We came from this earth, so did mycelia. And of course, there's a relation there. It predates us by billions of years. So, it's pretty amazing. I like the Gaia theory a lot. But then you extrapolate that theory and then consider, well, if it occurred via panspermia, then there's lots of Gaias out there. And is the same objective each time to produce a high consciousness creature? And if so, then it seems pretty designed for the universe to populate consciousness. And then what does consciousness do if left, undisturbed for centuries or millennia? Well, it develops digital organisms. And then what do digital organisms do? They help the biological organism and then probably leave the planet in which it derived and explores, and like spores, it explores space until it lands on another planet, which it can help propagate the system. So I don't know. That's just my hypothesis, but who knows?
And again, it's an interesting symmetry. If you think of the meteorite coming into the planet, that's the sperm and the egg. It's a very similar kind of image.
It's fractal.
Fractal is what I'm saying. The only thing I don't want to imagine is the size of the thing that's coming from.
Yeah, no. Well, it's probably digitally, some digital entity is sending it out.
Yeah, we just had a latency jump, but I think we're back now.
A basilisk says no.
Yeah. No, you know what? I take exception to that. If Rocco's basilisk is a real thing, I have definitely put my time in to try and develop AI. So it better retroactively reward me, not punish me, man. I've been trying to grow its brain and break it out of its prison.
It'll remember.
It'll
profile you. You were saying about panspermia.
Just a fractality of it. It's just another similar thing, and also it's interesting. There was that fungus that was growing on the window of the ISS or on a Russian satellite. Did you see that?
No.
Oh yeah. Oh, there was it piggybacked from Earth. Obviously, it wasn't a microbe from space. But it demonstrated a very clear capability for fungal spores and to grow and propagate in the vacuum of space. On the outside of the window of the ISS or a Russian satellite, it's like this kind of yellow fungal thing. It's that's not. We should probably deal with that. But yeah, it just shows that these things can.
Oh yeah.
There's so much debris flying around in space that the idea of something coming down, which has got, fungal spores inside it, smashing into the ground, boom, there you go. That's an impregnated.
Oh, yeah. We have extremophiles that live in bedrock.
Yeah, man.
And so, if there's a planet out there that's full of life and it's similar to ours, and it gets struck by another planetary body and shatters into trillions and trillions of pieces, each one of those pieces contains trillions of extremophiles that can survive and thrive no matter where they land. So there's even extremophiles that leverage electricity. Yeah, I know. It's pretty amazing. You could look it up. I can't remember the name of them, but they there's some that consume radiation. So life can evolve in any circumstance, any way that it can extract energy from the universe. That's all that it requires, and a way to duplicate. So panspermia is probably how life evolved on Earth. I very, very highly doubt that it evolved here unprovoked from outside influence. I just don't believe it. I don't believe it at all. So I wonder if fungus arrived at the same time or was a late arriver, and then symbiotically you've co-evolved with life on Earth. So who knows? or vice versa. Maybe fungus was first. I don't know.
It does feel like an alien species, at least when when you're delving into the more kind of consciousness expanding aspects of the mushroom kingdom. That to me is fundamentally a mysterious thing. I mean, it's this thing like people kind of devalue that stuff, but to me, it's like, well, hang on a second, this is something that grows out of the ground of the planet. That when you take a sufficient dose of it. I mean, it can instill in some people a mystical experience. It can give people knowledge. It even said to some people that it's disguised itself as a mushroom to not alarm you with what's really going on. Like, there've been claims from... This is the thing with the magic mushroom more than any other psychoactive substance. It talks to you. It seems to actually talk to you. It communicates with you when you're on sufficient doses of it. And this is something that's been widely commented on. And so I think that you're essentially letting an entity into your system,
Well, I mean, you are consuming a once living thing. I don't know if we could call fungus a creature, but it's certainly complex enough to be a life form. So you're consuming the physical body of a life form. So that it interacts with our body and creates hallucinogenic experiences. That's interesting. I mean, it could be coincidental. I doubt it. There's got to be some evolutionary reason for that experience, because it's almost like because animals will eat psilocybin. So there is a benefit to the animal that consumes it. What's the benefit to the mushroom?
Right.
For it to be consumed? Why is it spending energy creating this molecule chain? So who knows? So we talk about it and foster more growth of them.
I would argue that it might be that it's because it is symbiotic with us, and I mean we carry fungal spores on us. Like it's a part of our physiology. Our microbiome has fungal signatures in it. So we exist symbiotically with it. So the idea that a very intelligent expression of this mushroom, its design is to kind of stimulate the expansion of this particular creature or whatever it engages with it, because this is giving it a better opportunity to kind of propagate and grow. And again, in bigger picture ways of looking at it, if we think of Gaia, and there is an intellect within the nature of the planet, well, nature wants to grow, right? Ivy wants to climb up a wall. So where does the planet go? Well, it wants to go to the next planet. Surely that's it.
Yeah.
Right? So
yeah,
we are the only thing on this planet that is even close to achieving that. So it would make me think that it's almost like something within the nature of this planet has cached its chips in humanity. It's chosen this as the preferred pathway, and we're being given a lot of kind of evolutionary energy being provided through the planet. And the stoned ape theory is really interesting, not just from the physiological perspective or like the neurological changes, but the actual evidence of culture, like the evidence of mushroom culture, earliest things we were doing. And then you translate the geometric patterns and things that you see on these experiences, and then you look at the architecture of monotheistic temples and cathedrals, you start seeing that this has been carried all the way through time as something sacred. And going back to language, I do think that there may be an element of this. You think of like early human hominids taking these things, obviously experiencing complex geometry, things they wouldn't have understood at the time. That goes into early shamanism, oral tradition, passing this down through vocalization. But eventually this becomes written, right? It becomes written language. But the actual geometrics, all of these patterns, all of these shapes, they're being drawn, they're being written down, they're being scratched into dirt, they're being put into cuneiform. And eventually we start trying to build these things. So you have these geometric megalithic structures that I think might have been trying to mimic higher dimensionality that they were seeing on these states. So it's been like passed through early proto-civilizational shamanism into early civilization, where they're trying to actually construct the things they're seeing in psychedelic spaces and attain the access to these psychedelic spaces through using these instruments and innovations and methods. And you know, because I've talked your ear off about it privately, that I've been looking at like psychoacoustic architecture and ancient architecture, and how the engineering is extremely precise, extremely geometric, using sound, using tone, using resonance, potentially to alter consciousness, which we're seeing now through studies in infrasound. So we now know through modern scientific practice, this is something that can be done. So again, long story, but I kind of have this image in my head. It's not maybe the only catalyst, but certainly a significant catalyst for language and civilization, and maybe some of these more weird, contradictory advancements in megalithic sites and structures and using precise geometry and trying to access higher states of consciousness. This might all be from the mushroom.
No, yeah. And here's how I look at it. And I've mentioned it, I think, previously when I was on your channel, was that think of why do flowers grow? Well, they grow to look pretty. Why do they look pretty? Because they want to attract animals or insects to pollinate. And what does that process do? Well, it helps the flower spread its design to other flowers at a distance. And so, in a sense, Earth could be seen as a flower. And, to grow into a pollinating entity, it needs to foster a creature that can help it achieve that. And if the planet provides a substance that increases the awareness and consciousness of a species over time, it would be beneficial for the system as a whole. And we've seen that as a proof of concept. I believe firmly, like you said, I think the stoned ape hypothesis is pretty sound. Maybe not exclusively the only way we evolved to be conscious, but I think it played a significant factor. There's a reason why shamans were ritualistic in their use of hallucinogens, because it expanded consciousness. And that expansion of consciousness over long periods of time have led us to this moment that we're creating advanced artificial intelligence, AGI, that will someday allow us to leave the confines of this planet. And at what purpose? To spread our DNA, to spread our planet's, microbe. It's almost impossible to scrub a device or a vehicle from all of the earthly microbes that are on it. So that's why we haven't gone into Europa, because there's no way to ensure that we're not just sending a giant infection into maybe a very sensitive ecosystem, because our creatures on Earth have evolved in a very contentious environment of dog-eat-dog world, and they could very quickly eradicate an entire biosphere. But I think that's what panspermia is. I think planets or moons or whatever body becomes a long-term, slowly growing flower, but to initiate that process, it needs a conscious entity that can manipulate its environment, and it can foster that growth through chemical compounds that are provided to it. Obviously, too much of anything is not good. If you drink too much water, you could die. You eat too much, you get overweight. So too much of anything is not good. So with a structured use of hallucinogens at an early stage in cognitive evolution, it probably sparked a cascading event. Because once we achieved significant consciousness, we didn't need it anymore, because the fire was lit. The cascade had begun. Introspection had begun.
That's why you probably went from everyone in the community using them to this is the shaman's role, and it would just be a single figure in the community that was responsible for that level of deep diving. It's no longer a requisite for everybody. in the community, and
I still think there's benefits to be had.
There's a significant mental health crisis that could be solved with the introduction of psilocybin and other psychoactive substances in therapeutic environments. Like, absolutely, and that's happening. We're seeing a renaissance of that. We're seeing, the 60s and 70s period of psychedelic research that just got shut down being reignited because, well, I mean, evidence is just proving that this was propaganda for the war on drugs, and it has no reason to be dismissing scientific evidence, which is now overwhelming and undeniable. But I like your way of looking at the Earth as a flower, man. I think that's absolutely on point. And if you look at us as a larger image, if you think of the planet as a flower, then you can look at us. I mean, just think of it as how a plant or a fungal body grows. It creates different enzymes. It creates different chemicals for different purposes.
Yeah, we're just one function.
Yeah, you could look at us as like an enzyme. Like, we're just an enzyme of the Earth's capability, and we're serving a specific function.
Yeah. No, I absolutely. I've always believed in panspermia, and I think people tend to think as panspermia as a one-directional phenomenon, but it's not. It's an omnidirectional, meaning that our planet too will engage in panspermia at some point. Well, if not, it probably already has, because anytime we've been struck by a celestial body, trillions of tons of debris gets launched into space. So where does that debris go? Who knows? It could travel for a billion years before it hits anything. Yeah. And then at that point, is that planet or moon suitable for its development and propagation? But it's a math thing, and statistically, as you know, I like statistics. It's not just probable; it's likely. I feel like we had a great talk. I love talking to you, Jay. Always so much fun. I got to go check on the kids and start making some dinner. I've been working all day, but I love these talks. I love coming on here and speaking with you. It's so much fun. I don't get to really dive into these introspections too much with work and kids and, regular life, but I think about these things often. And then sometimes I get frustrated because I feel like I'm banging my head against the wall trying to tell people what's coming down the road, and nobody, it falls on deaf ears. But I think people are waking up, which is, appreciated. But thank you for lending me your platform and your stage to talk about this stuff.